Hello and welcome back to another tasty Blender tutorial. Yes, today we are continuing our previous tutorial of our wobbly hit head or whatever you want to call it. In this tutorial, I'll be showing you how to texture the head and how to light it and prep it for rendering in EEVEE. As always, there is a free resource file available for you in the link in the description on my GUMROAD. Make sure to check that out. And also don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel because it helps me out a lot. In any case, let's get into the video. So this is where we've left off last time. Now we want to light our object and light our model. We're gonna go under our rendering tab or rendering properties over here. I'll just check a couple of things like ambient occlusion, screen space reflections with refraction and trace precision to 1. I'm also gonna do color management and put it to medium, high, or high contrast. That's some stuff that I usually do by default. Now in our EEVEE setup, I'll also go under my world tab and just drop it down to 0 in strength, and I'll start adding some lights. So I'm gonna add a light, and this is gonna be an area light, like so. Move it up there. I'm gonna go under my object constraints and add a track 2. And with the eyedropper, I'll choose our head. Now you might see that the light is not pointing at the head directly. And this is because we just need to click on the head, press Shift Control Alt C, origin to geometry. You can also do that in object, set origin, origin to geometry. And you can see our light is now following the actual head. So when I try to light my objects, as always, I try to find spots where it's going to be highlighted, where it's going to be darker, and just in general accentuate the shape. I usually start with lights because if I can make an object work with lights alone, I know that materials are not going to be a problem. So in my case, let me start increasing the power and let's go to 500. So this is exactly what I wouldn't want to see, too much of this white. I can also increase the size so the effect, or rather the strength of the light is, let's say, not as strong. And I try to position the light in various ways. Let's say something like this. I can lower the size and then I just press Shift D and duplicate it and pop it to another side. So on this side, I've pushed it back slightly. I'm also going to divide my screen so you can see how it looks in my 3D view, like that. And I now try to position it in the back so I get just a slight bit of rim. I'm also going to move it on the Y back like that and just decrease the size. So I have these parts over here slightly highlighted. One way I usually go about it is also increase the rim light to be very strong. In my case, it's going to be 1000 watts. And with the first light selected, I'm just going to duplicate it. And now I just want to do a bit more on the front. However, this is a bit strong, so I'm just going to switch it to 250. If 250 is too strong, I'm going to go to 100. I just want a bit of light. So if I turn it off, on, you can see a huge difference there. Maybe I'm also going to just leave it without that light, something like that. I can also turn it off and have just a bit of mystery to it. My right screen, I'm going to change it to the shader editor and I'll start adding some things. So for our specific head over here, let me lower this bad boy down. I'm just going to add a couple of things. And before I start doing that, make sure under your edit preferences and add-ons, you have Node Wrangler enabled. Node Wrangler is an insanely useful add-on. It has shortcuts for setting up very quick node setups. So let me click on the principled BSDF and I'm going to press Ctrl T. And this adds a texture coordinate, a mapping node, and a image texture. Now in this image texture, we can put whatever we want. In my case, I've been slightly obsessed with like markers and this sort of stuff in the past few weeks. So I'm going to open up a marker picture that I have. So this is how the marker looks right now. It's not very interesting. What I'm just going to do is add a value node and connect it into the scale. This is a trick by CG Matter that he uses a lot. And I'm just going to position it somewhere like that. Maybe a 5 or a 3. I'm just looking for a nice distribution of the symbols on the face. with this marker selected, I want to have the markings to be light emissive, and I want the head to be a completely different texture. So how do we achieve that? Well, first of all, we're going to set the illumination part. So the illumination part is going to be a trick that I've been using for a while. It's going to be the mix shader. I'm going to add a Fresnel shader. I'm going to add a black body. And I'm going to add a emission. And then I'm going to add a diffuse BSDF. So I'm going to pop the color of the black body into the emission and into the diffuse, the emission into the bottom socket, and the diffuse into the top socket, the factorial into the factorial, and that's our emissive. So if I plop it into our surface, you can see it's working. The Fresnel here is just to add that sort of definition to the shapes. So if you lower it below 1, it's just going to add these emissions all over the surface. But I usually keep it, let's say, at 1.7, 1.5, something like that. How do we mix these? Well, with a mix shader as well. So I'm just going to position this bad boy here, and I'm going to add another mix shader. And this mix shader, I'll just put the top to be the principal BSDF and the bottom to be our emissive. But this is not working as we would like it to. We want the markings to be emissive and the rest of the head another material. So instead of putting the color of the marker into the base color, I'm just going to take that bad boy away and I'm going to enter it into the factorial. And now you can see it's distributing the color and everything exactly as it should. So I'm just going to switch the sockets. And now the emissive is going to be on the markings. Let's increase the strength to, I don't know, 45. And you can see how it's like starting to glow. The temperature, you can also put it, let's say, to 2000. It's basically gonna go from really red to sort of whitish or more bluish. This is just usually the way I arrange them. And now for the other side of the head, I'm going to use a specific type of texture. In my case, I've downloaded a couple of sci-fi textures from textures.com that are for free. They're lower resolution, but they still work pretty fine. So I'm just going to go Shift-Control-T, and in my miscellaneous folder, I'll try to find some of the stuff that I'm looking for. In my case, I'm just going to use this texture, and I'm going to choose the albedo, the emissive, the height, the metallic, the normal, the roughness, all up to the roughness. So usually it's either 6 or 5 maps that you can download, and these are totally for free on textures.com. So let me add that principled BSDF, and as you can see, it just set up all of the things as you would wish to. So it just puts them exactly as you would want them to. Now we're missing one of the maps, and it's actually the emissive maps. So I'm just going to add another image texture. And you might be wondering, why aren't you duplicating one of the other maps? And it's because it's going to take one of these characteristics like non-color or color or sRGB. So I usually just open a fresh new one and find the emissive map. When I have the emissive map, I just push it into the emission and then connect the vector socket to my image. And now if I want to, I can just increase the emission strength. But in our case, it just doesn't make a lot of difference. So I'm just going to leave it like that. You can increase the strength of your surface, of your normal map, but essentially that's it. So if we push it like that, you can see we can now change all of these values. We can make more markers, fewer markers. This is kind of a dope distribution of things. We can make them shine more. We can invert the Fresnel so it makes it way more intense, or we can have like a nice orangey type of distribution. So for this sort of stuff, I would also open up bloom, but in this case it's very strong. So I'm just gonna lower the threshold to 10 and just reduce the radius to something very subtle. So if I close it, it's like that. So and increase it to 2.6, it's gonna be like that. Now I'm gonna add a camera, like so. Control-Alt-0 pushes the camera into the view that we want. Just gonna select the camera, G, Z twice, and move it back, like so. Let me do just a test render to see how it looks. And yeah, fine. Looks perfectly fine to me. It's functioning good. Let me just go and see about that sphere in the back. So the sphere, we can either delete it, or if you don't want to delete it, you just go under visibility and you turn off renders. Press F12 and there's no sphere. And that's it. Maybe we can add just a bit of bloom. Another thing you can do that I've been a huge fan of lately is also open up the motion blur, make the radius a bit bigger, press F12, let's see what happens. So it's shaking the actual object and it's gonna look cool in the final render. And we can also go under the compositor, use the nodes and add a lens distortion node. Dispersion to, let's say 0.05 and click on fit. So the actual image fits into the camera. F12, and we have this nice little lens distortion over here. So if you want to learn how to render this bad boy out, just make sure you check out the rendering tutorial I have, which also shows you how to render out image sequences. So in any case, this is going to be it for this tutorial. Hopefully you've learned something useful. Hopefully you've learned something new. In any case, this is going to be available for free on my GUMROAD in the link in the description. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel because it helps me out a lot. And I will see you in the next one. Bye.